In Dar es Salaam, Médecins du Monde does the rounds of the poor district of Temeke. Ramson and his team on the NGO bus are here to help drug addicts and to protect local people from some of the consequences of addiction.
Let's inspect this place. Go get the litter pickers and the boxes.
Behind the railings lies a pile of used syringes. There are more than 50 here today. It's a system agreed by the addicts and the NGO to keep the streets safe.
Yes, it's still dangerous for children, but this is more or less all right because the railings stop the children getting hold of the syringes. Previously, the addicts were throwing syringes everywhere, all over the streets. Children walk barefoot here, and it was dangerous for them.
Heroin has ravaged Temeke. It's not unusual to see addicts stumbling about the streets in the middle of the day. But the locals barely even notice.
It doesn't happen often, but it happens. Sometimes they like to walk around with the syringe in their arm.
A few minutes later, other heroin addicts arrive. They all know that the Médecins du Monde bus carries clean needles.
There are 5 syringes here, with saline solution and disinfectant.
The place where the addicts go to take their drugs is just a few meters away. Some of them are barely 20 years old.
It was quite normal before this project for people to share the same needle. For example, when I was an addict, lots of people shared needles. Why? Because it was very difficult to find them. Because pharmacists didn't sell needles to junkies. When you bought a needle, you would use it several times, 7 or 8 times.
Ramson joined Médecins du Monde when it launched its risk prevention program in 2010. As a former drug addict himself, he gets a certain amount of respect, but despite his experience, he still struggles to stop these young people taking drugs.
Him over there, for example, I can talk to him and explain the risks and the consequences of injecting and what kind of diseases he could catch. By knowing that, maybe he can change and decide to stop.
Médecins du Monde believes distributing clean syringes is still the best way to prevent the spread of diseases like AIDS. 1/3 of all addicts here are infected. In Eastern Africa, heroin use has spread like wildfire right up to the shores of Zanzibar. Historically, the island, which forms part of Tanzania, was a crossroads between the East and the African continent. But in recent years, the spice route has become a drug route, turning the island into a gateway for Afghan and Pakistani heroin. These images show a joint Canadian-Australian operation boarding a suspected boat. The raid produced one of the biggest seizures of heroin in the past few years, 500 kilos at a street value of around 80 million euros. Isla, with his emaciated figure and headgear, is 30 and an addict. He spends all day, every day, getting high with his friend Musa. But today Isla's in a bad mood. It's 9 AM and he still hasn't smoked anything. His pockets are empty, so he does what he often does, goes to see his family and picks up some clothes.
Yesterday I smoked a lot, and this morning when I woke up, I didn't have any money left. I'm going to the market now to sell something and make a bit of money. Then I'm going to buy some drugs to smoke with my friends.
To fill his pockets, Isla plans to sell his shirt and his hat. The sale brings him about 4,000 shillings, or 2 euros. It's enough for Isla to provide for his family for a few days, but his craving for heroin comes first.
When I don't find money, I keep looking right through the afternoon. I don't eat anything. I look for money, and when I find it, I'll smoke, and then I'll feel all right.
The effects of smoking heroin are just as devastating as injecting it. Isla and Musa have been taking it for years. Heroin sells cheap here. At €1 a dose, the white powder has poured onto the streets of Stone Town, the island's capital, and destroyed thousands of families.
I've been smoking for many years. It's bought me nothing. I've lost my health and my family. My baby's grown up. Now he's 10 years old. He knows about it. His friends tell him, "Your father smokes drugs and everything. Look at the state of him." My son's ashamed. And I'm ashamed as well.
According to the Ministry of Health, 10,000 of the island's population of 1 million are addicted to heroin. This reality does not appear in any tourist guides. On Zanzibar, visitors learn only about the beaches, their fine sands, turquoise waters, and UNESCO-classified sites. But the fight against heroin has become the business of the entire island, including the creation of a civil police force made up of residents, the Polisi Jami.
Hey, what are you doing there?
Issa is 37 years old and a former soldier. He joined the Polisi Jami 3 years ago. He wants to clear Stone Town streets of addicts.
You don't take drugs?
No.
The search comes up with nothing. Issa and his men find no trace of drugs. Not far away, the Polisi Jami have better luck.
What have you put in your mouth? Take out whatever you have in your mouth.
Don't go looking for trouble. Take it out of your mouth.
Fearing that his drugs will be seized, the man has hidden the heroin in his mouth. But eventually he gives in.
What is this?
It's heroin.
2 doses of so-called brown sugar, or brown heroin. Some of the most expensive on the market. He was about to sniff it without caring if he was being watched. The authorities have a tough, no-tolerance approach to drug abuse.
We hate the drug business. That's why we're invested in our work with all our hearts, so it disappears.
But this time, they're letting the man go with nothing more than a lecture.
Taking drugs is not good. You won't see any benefits. Look, you have a family. Look after them. There's nothing interesting in drugs. I ask you to come to our offices tomorrow so we can have a chat.
When he's released, the man complains of harassment. He says drug abusers are easy targets for the Polisi Jami.
To tell you the truth, these people, they don't go for the dealers. They only go for the small users. That's the big reality here in Zanzibar.
The authorities say they're throwing everything they've got against drug trafficking. But in reality, dealers are rarely arrested. In Stone Town, this face is well known to most addicts, and for good reason. 37-year-old Hamoud, also known as Fido Dido, spent half his life selling heroin. These narrow streets are where he worked.
You see, I say around here from there, and sometimes I keep it here. You see, sometimes I can take the bottle and keep it inside the bottle and just keep it away.
On a good day, he could earn up to €250. In Zanzibar, that's a small fortune. But after 15 years of dealing, Fido Dido has turned his back on his past life. He's decided to go clean, but is happy to talk freely about his former job.
I had great protection because almost all the policemen knew who I was. Sometimes, when they carried out a raid at my place, the policeman I was paying gave me forewarning so I could hide the drugs. The police found nothing every time.
It's the sort of corruption that could explain the impunity enjoyed by some dealers. After he got into drugs, Fido Dido's opinions on heroin began to change.
At the beginning, when heroin first arrived, people didn't know what it was. Some of them smoked it, some of them sniffed it. When people took it, they would get together in a group. It became fashionable. Youngsters wanted to try it, to taste it. And eventually, they became dependent and started to sell heroin themselves. That's how it became such a big problem.
For most, the only way to break their dependence on drugs is to go to a withdrawal house. In Zanzibar, there are 9. The Detroit Sober House was the first to open its doors. Among its occupants is Jafar, who's 23 years old.
I came in this house. I was not like this. I was too thin, with my shoulders are like this. But now I'm doing push-ups, push-up, a little bit of gym over there, boxing. I feel great, my physical, it's changed.
Before Jafar came to the Detroit Sober House, he was addicted to heroin. He smoked several times a day. For 7 years, his life was a nightmare. But for 1 month and 20 days, he's been clean.
I thought, like, if I came here, maybe they will try to reduce my smoking. Maybe if I used to smoke 5 or 6 things, maybe they give me 1 or 2. But I came here, they gave me nothing, and I accepted.
The life of the 28 people who live here is punctuated by daily tasks. Each has a small responsibility as a way of getting back on their feet. They have classes once a day.
Stay clean just for today.
Their teacher is a former addict who's been off drugs for more than a year. He teaches them 12 steps to get rid of their addiction, using a method inspired by Alcoholics Anonymous. Without subsidized treatments, relapses are common. Only around 4 in 10 stick with it. Jafar's determined to be one of those 4.
I remember the first days which I came. I remember the pain of which I was suffering. So I'm like, no, I don't want to go back anymore.
In the absence of an official program, the reintegration into society of these addicts is going to be a tough challenge. And while the authorities turn a blind eye, things are getting worse. With 22 tons of heroin moving through here every year and usage expanding fast, drugs look set to ravage the lives of an entire generation.